Have you given any thought to contributing to the melt? It's easy to do. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. It helps to keep the magic happening here at the Melt. So I encourage you to karmically entangle yourself with the Melt today by subscribing monthly for less than the price of a container of goatee wax, or a prosthetic pinky, or a half stick of DMT butter, or an inflatable casket, or the shrunken head of an Atlantean supermodel, or a woolly mammoth's merkin, or a crystalline replica of Baba Yaga's hut, or a capsule of Sasquatch dander.
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
At least since The Matrix came out in 1999, and even more so as the internet became more and more ubiquitous, people have been diving down the rabbit hole of meta-existentialism in their questioning of the nature of reality itself. Simulation theory has always seemed a bit technopomorphic to me, and for some reason that notion reminds me of a Terence McKenna quote.
It's completely silly to search the galaxy with radio telescopes for a radio civilization. I mean, to my mind, that is as chuckle-headed as deciding you're going to search the galaxy for a decent Italian restaurant. I mean, it doesn't work like that.
Meaning that characterizing reality in terms of what our current understanding of technology is seems a bit naive and short-sighted to me. But, as you will hear in this fascinating conversation with Howdie Mickoski, we explored this and many other possibilities in regards to where it is we might actually be. I start off the conversation by asking Howdie why he suspected that what we experience as this reality is indeed not a school.
That's sort of, in most sort of spiritual circles, that's the presented explanation of why we are here in this manifested world. And of course, it's the one that makes people feel good, because then it doesn't matter what's happening to them. There's someone or something who's, again, caring about them and is doing all this bad stuff is happening for something really good. But we've got this issue. And the issue that makes it not credible for me is, let's assume we've had other lives before this one. So we've had, whether they be past lives or we've had this life lived hundreds or thousands of times, parallel lives. In each of those experiences, we should be learning things. We should be making mistakes. We should be going left instead of going right. It loses its credibility, because if this really is a school, after you die from one life and move into another life, whatever that life is, you should have memory of that life. I shouldn't have to make the same mistake again and again and again and again and again. The point is, you make a mistake, oh yeah, and then you don't do it again. But if you have no memory of the previous mistake, the high likelihood is then you'll make it again. So this idea that we show up with a memory wipe or something wipes our mind takes it away from being a school right away, because if you can't remember what you've done right or wrong, you haven't actually learned anything other than the little bit of this life. Now, you could get around it by saying, well, it's supposed to be a school, but this place was hijacked by some sort of evil being that gets to you before you actually manifest into a physical creature each time, and they're the ones who wipe your mind. But if you go into the Corpus Hermeticum and you read some of the things on the what they call the cup of forgetfulness, right? It's right in the Corpus Hermeticum. So you're talking 2,000 years ago. Key Hermetic text is talking about when you're born, you're given this cup of forgetfulness, and part of your life is to drink this other cup that kind of makes you remember things. So who or what is giving us that cup? So for me, school is I'm talking from a grand perspective. I mean, are there things to learn in the dream? Yeah. Can you build a computer better? Can you be a better parent to your kids? Can you learn to, handle nature better, et cetera, et cetera? But is this a place of sort of cosmic learning? That right away throws it out the window as no for me if you can't remember previous lives.
Well, I think it's interesting. Some people posit that, as you were saying, it doesn't seem like we are possibly bringing mistakes or the mistakes what we've learned from these mistakes from past lives. But some people think that that's maybe where your gut instinct comes from. Like when you get this voice saying, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go down that road, that comes from these past experiences, and that there's a reason that there's this sort of veil in between this one and the last one, because, there is something to be benefited from by not remembering every step that you took beforehand, because otherwise you're just kind of going over a script and editing it rather than experientially possibly getting something from a particular situation.
I could see someone putting that together, but again, I don't buy that, because if the goal or if the possibility is total knowing, total knowledge, totality of the self, that's like, Hunter being with Castaneda before, that word, right? Then that's a lot of work. And totality is it's a very little, it's small because it's nothing, but it's also vast because it's everything. And so I think if you have to keep wasting your time going over the same thing again and again and again and again, only because you weren't allowed to remember what you did right. And it's also not just the mistakes you made, it's things you did really well.
For sure.
Things that you've forgotten those too. Like it's very strange for me when I get memories of what I call parallel lives. I have many memories of where I'm living this exact life I have now, and I'm just living it in different circumstances, in a different place, with a different wife, with a different career, with a different everything. And I tend to get really decent amounts of information about myself on sort of a grander scale by tapping into these other selves that are having different experiences. And it's sort of interesting because then it helps me this is the other corollary to this, is then I don't have to learn everything in this life. If there's a million me's living this experience, there's a million possibilities to experience, everything. And all we have to do is find a way to weave all the experiences together. I was having a conversation with Chance Gartner yesterday. And in the course of, we were talking about these parallel lives and the interaction and connecting with them. And I asked him this question because he does healing. I said, okay, next time you do healing, try this as an experiment. Instead of trying to send like just generic energy to the person you're healing, try to tap into another life of that person, like where they're themselves in a parallel reality where they're totally healthy. So you're tapping into their own energy, their own self, their own healthiness, and sort of see if you can redirect some of their own energy back to where they are, because then it means if you're doing something like this, all of our lives, even if we're not seeing them, are actually connected. Like, I'm not very good at fixing a car, but one of my lives, one of me's must have figured out well how to fix a car. So I have to go under my hood. I should really just sit there for a while, get really calm and say, where's the me that knows how to do this? Can you sort of drift into my consciousness for a little bit, and then all of these lives and all these experiences can be shared with one another. So I've kind of flipped it over for you.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible that it's a collective consciousness and that it's not several different Howdies that you're experiencing, but it's the human experience, and maybe it's someone down the street that you're resonating with or tapping in with?
I mean, in one sense, of course, that's true. There's only one consciousness. There's only one, but given that I'm seeing this reality as more of a simulation,
Mm-hmm.
or as like as an experiment almost, that all the indications of my work over the last 20 years has led that way, it would make sense then, if you're going to run some kind of simulation or experiment, you don't want to just run one life, one run through, one whatever. You'd want millions of them because you need data. So if you need data, it would make more sense that, yeah, on one level, like when somebody says, oh, in a past life, I was this whoever. And of course,
Right.
they're always usually somebody important, right?
Sure.
And in a sense, I consider that to be kind of true, because there's only, if you go deep enough, there's only absolute, there's only one. So yes, in a sense you are, but it's not personal. It's not like I was this person per se,
Exactly.
but I am, because I'm the same consciousness is looking through all experience. But I still would say that there, at the same token, there still are multiple me's, because like I say, I've had experiences of myself dying in other lives. I've had experiences of things I've done, things I haven't done, that are as real to me as the life I'm having now. So I would say yes to both of those as possibilities.
Castaneda does talk about active dreaming, which is different from lucid dreaming. And
Mm.
one of the exercises was looking in the mirror. So, in these experiences that you've had, have you
Mhm.
seen yourself in this other reality or this other version of yourself?
Sometimes a little of both. Yeah. Sometimes it will be in in sort of like like I say, an active dreaming state, I guess is the best way to describe it. Or I guess a Westerny like person would try to call it journeying or something. I don't like to use that word because it's not really, has nothing to do with Indians, but um, something like that, where I'm actually sort of seeing through my eyes in a different place, but I know I know it's not something that is symbolic or just made up. It's, I'm seeing clearly through other eyes. But I've had other experiences, like when I saw myself die. It was in early May 1999. I was walking down the street. I'd been on a bachelor auction date the day before. Horrible experience. The cause was really good. It was for, I think, breast cancer research. So you can't say no when they ask you. But the person the one who bought me was a drunk, and it was an awful experience. And the next day
Oh,
it was awful, like really awful. And the next day, Bill, I was walking down the street, and I was reviewing the night in my mind. I was reviewing the conversation. And then somewhere she said, why did you start studying with these native Indian medicine people anyway? Something like that. And I said, well, if I didn't, I'd probably be dead now. And in that moment, where I was walking on the street disappeared. And I now was literally seeing, like the scene had changed completely. And I was seeing a car accident. There was a truck that had smashed into a car, and there was a truck driver who was walking around a bit staggered. He didn't look too hurt. I wasn't walking, right? I was kind of moving, floating almost. I moved over to where the car was, and there was a woman with brown hair who'd been very injured, and she was kind of leaned up against the dashboard, and there was blood on her head. And then I saw a third car tipped over in the ditch. And I thought, oh, I wonder if that person's okay. So I sort of moved over to that. I looked in the window and realized the person's dead. And as I looked closer, oh, it's me. And a clear image. I mean, I saw myself dead in that moment. And so I've had both. I've had ones which you would more, yeah, classify as like a dreaming or a journeying. And then there's been other times like that where in certain moments, this reality just goes away, and the other one sort of comes in for a moment so I can see um, this other reality.
interesting. Wow. Are you familiar with Cynthia Sue Larson at all?
Not completely, but I'm not. Is there, if you maybe give me something to trigger my memory, I might be able to say yes.
Well, she does something, or she's written a couple of books on something called quantum leaping. And it's basically consciously trying to induce a timeline hop, basically trying to hop to another timeline to a more preferred outcome to a given situation.
Okay. I Yeah, I know a woman named Amara Strand who speaks a little bit similarly, but what she talks about that there are multiple strands of experience sort of running through the moment. And if you are in a strand that's not really good, you just want to shift, you want to jump to another one. You're not jumping to another self. You're still yourself. You're just like changing almost the frequency
Yeah.
band that you're on. You're like changing the radio frequency you're connecting to, you might say. And that's still not a good explanation. She gave this information to me like 3 years ago, and I'm still trying to figure it out because it's very deep. But I knew right away she's telling me the truth that, oh yeah, if you make us and things. Once she told me this information, things did change, and of course, little things did start to change, and I knew, oh, that's what she's talking about. This right here. And then it was, okay, how do I hold this frequency? Because I don't want to slip back to the frequency I was in. How do I stay in the frequency? But the other one of this idea of quantum leaping, but the question then becomes, okay, let's say, okay, I don't like my life. This life sucks. And I'm going to try to jump into a life that I think I'm going to like better. What happens to the me in this life here? Would the me in this life just become a zombie and
Yeah.
kind of just walk around, like a non-player character in a
Yeah,
video game?
exactly.
Would I disappear? That's a really interesting question that if she was here, I'd want to ask her answer to that. What then happens to the experiential self that you didn't like, that you jumped out of?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it is a complete embodiment of that new self. So the you in this reality is still you, but you have taken on this other energy, so you completely embody that energy, and it's almost like your brain is bifurcated, so that other you is still there, but it's not the one that's the operating system. So you change the way you dress, you change the way you speak, you change the job that you have. You completely, it's like a complete erasure of this reality. So I think it's possible that you can again resonate, because we're talking about frequencies here. So you're resonating with a different place in your own energy. So the other you doesn't die, you're still there, but it's just like you've turned the power down.
Hmm. So I bring this up just because since we've gone through this 2-year insanity, and I've watched how humans have operated,
Mm-hmm.
I've really started to wonder how many humans there really are in this reality. How many are actually whatever we classify as what a human is, and how many are, yeah, just non-player characters, literally just empty shells populating a reality to make it seem like it's big and theatrical and there's lots going on, and there actually may not be. It might be, this might actually be a very, a very vast experience with very few real creatures experiencing it.
Yeah.
I know that for some people that's gonna sound really freaky, but I've been really wondering. I'm still on the fence on that one. But what about you guys? Have you guys touched on that at all in the last year or two, especially
That's a
with the sort of
fantastic
strange behavior of people?
Fantastic question. I've lived in large cities for most of my life. So I lived in Los Angeles, I've lived in New York, and I can tell you, walking down a street in Manhattan, I would say maybe 60% of the people you see don't seem like they're real. Like they're not, and the people who are, you actually make eye contact with you, there's some engagement. So I think it's possible for sure.
Yeah, it seems like there's different, obviously different levels of consciousness, but if you're not to the point where you can do something like self-reflect and sort of wake up, and like you wake up in a lucid dream, you wake up in a dream and you go, I'm dreaming, I can do whatever I want here. Okay, let's do this. Let's make this monster go away or whatever. I think the same thing can happen in quote unquote waking life, if and there are many people that don't get to that point. They're just sort of automatons, non-player characters. They're taking in information, but they're just spitting it back out. They're not processing it. They're not, using their critical thinking skills to grapple with it in any way, or kind of weed out what is something that they accept and something that they don't. They just accept everything and act accordingly without any questioning going on.
But maybe they're necessary.
I think there's a lot of that, but I would be more with like what Hunter just said there, which is I actually think at least half of what I see are not actually people at all. That they can't be classified. Oh, they're just, and of course this idea that, oh, but you and I, we are so we have evolved to some other level above these people. It's very tricky that it's so easy for us to think, oh, I'm doing so much better than all these other people. They're struggling because they don't know how to do this or how to go within or how to. And there was a novel by Ken Grimwood called Replay, where a person was reliving his life over and over and over again. And in the course of one of his lives, this other replayer that he got to know didn't seem like she had come back in the next replay, that he was just talking to like the old robotic shell. And then he started to wonder, wait a minute, I thought by all the stuff I was knowing, I was way ahead of everybody. Maybe I'm like the last one to get it. Maybe all the other humans on the whole planet, they've already done their work. They're gone. The reason the reason all these other people are shells is because they figured it out many lifetimes ago. And actually, I'm the moron. I'm the one that's taken way longer than everyone else. And I think I'm doing so well. And I'm actually, by this true standpoint of time, I've took a long, long time. So it's also interesting to shift this possibility and see our own self-reflection and our own importance as well in how we view our own journey, which is also an interesting going within. Just how do we view our own journey and where we are in it?
Absolutely. Well, speaking of all of this, do you actually, what are your thoughts on reincarnation? Do you think that we do come back? I mean, you mentioned you mentioned coming back, I think in some talk of yours, coming back in the same body even.
Yeah. That now I'm pretty, well, again, I don't say coming back because I don't believe, I believe it's like, it's all one time. So certainly at least when I'm dealing with multiple me's, it's the same time frame, just like seemingly a different space, but the time is equal. All of other lives, sure. I mean, why not have multiple experiences? But again, like Hunter was saying, in a sense, when you take it back to consciousness, you don't necessarily have to have an individualized me thing specifically go from time frame to time frame to time frame, body to body to body, because all of those experiences are being, you might say, cataloged or linked together if you go back further enough into the same mainframe or the same viewing box. So I leave it open as possible. I mean, there's been enough interesting experiences, where kids remember some other life perfectly, and then they go check it out and they talk to people. And yes, how could this child know this? But the question then becomes, okay, was it the child's personal life that somehow moved from one time frame to another, or yes, has the child in some way connected consciously with that interconnected consciousness that was also this other character? So it's connected. It is the child, but it's not as personal as we think. I'm not sure which it is. I don't sure if it matters necessarily. It does mean, though, I would assume you could connect with any life that's ever lived, ever, because it's on one level, it's you.
I think, sorry to interrupt you,
That's okay.
but I think what the element we're missing is cellular memories. So it's possible that what we're connecting with is our own DNA. And
Yep.
if you look at life as a collective consciousness or a collective reality, I can be resonating with a cell memory that someone else has had and experienced. And if this vessel is clean and tuned in enough, then I can resonate with every person that's ever existed.
Right. Right. Or even on a second scale level, you think of it, when a body dies, all of those cells disperse. So
Exactly.
where do they go? If I get the cells of somebody who, when I was born, who was somewhere else, and all of a sudden, in a sense, I would have picked up all of their memories, all of their, and that's the other part we have to switch from the other side of it. You're picking up potentially all the traumas, all the
Exactly.
difficulty. I was in a conversation again. We were talking about the weird orphan trains from the 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
and 250,000, 500,000 orphans in the United States being shipped westward, and obviously that's a time of mass trauma. All of those children are traumatized, probably the whole population for whatever happened. So, in a sense, our genetic heritage, at least from there, has this collective trauma in it, and so we're probably sometimes dealing with things within what we know are difficulties and traumas, but they're not personal per se, like you say, but it's like a cellular memory going back through our DNA or going back through some sort of heritage back to this very short time period ago where there seemed to be an existence here of extreme difficulty and extreme trauma. So that's another thing to always keep in mind.
And we can heal that.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not
Yeah, but
healing.
it helps to know that that's possible, that that's what you're dealing with.
Exactly.
Because if someone just keeps fighting on, this must have happened when I was 4 years old, what could it be? As soon as the person said, well, maybe it has nothing to do with my life right now, it has to do with something, then the door can open to these other healing possibilities. I think some people close themselves off and don't allow that as a possibility. So it's much harder for them to heal. Yeah.
Well, there's a saying in the Bible that says, blood cries from the stone. And what that means is that every life matters and every drop of blood that is spilled matters. So I think it's possible to go back into that, whatever you're resonating with, that trauma that you're resonating with, and heal that for someone else generationally, 10 generations back.
Well, back to the kids and their experiences when they remember, quote unquote, remember other lives. You guys are going too quickly for me. That could be, I think, also a case of sort of tapping into this Akashic record, sort of like Terrence and Dennis McKenna did in La Chorrera many, many years ago. But then you get these cases of where kids have birthmarks, very strange birthmarks in very particular places, and they correlate with the injury or the fatal injury of this past life that they're remembering. And that is hard to explain, hard to wrap your mind around in a sense of them just tapping into an Akashic record. That seems like something very tangible. It's very compelling information.
Yeah. I wish I knew more to be able to share with you, but unfortunately that's as far as I can go, I think.
Yeah, sure. We're
Well,
just speculating.
maybe again, it's this extreme trauma that happened to that other energy. And when this new baby came in, it's almost like a stamp or a mark that was left,
Yeah.
because again, it's that energy is intent on being expressed and acknowledged.
So you mentioned your near-death experience. Did you, I mean, first of all, if you want to maybe, for those who aren't familiar with it, maybe recount what happened, but did you glean any wisdom from that? Did you pick up anything in that interim where you came out feeling like you knew something that you didn't before it happened?
You mean when I was in the canyon? And
Yes.
actually that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I had because what happened was, I'll shorten it for so people don't have to hear the whole experience, but I slipped and fell into a raging river right next to a giant waterfall and was pretty much trapped in the river and was pretty much going over the falls and recognized in that moment that this is where I was going to die. And the key part of it for me was total acceptance. It was fine that I was going to die in this moment. I found it actually funny that there was like 10 million ways you could die, and this is how it's going to be for me. I was a fool. I slipped on a rock and I fell into a river I didn't know was dangerous, and here I was headed to the biggest waterfall in Canada. And as soon as I had had that total acceptance, everything I would classify as me was gone. So thought, memory, experiences, hopes, fears, dreams, everything, nothing. It was the real, I mean, I had gone through 5 or 6 years of working with the Korean Zen monk. Before that, I'd spent a lot of time with some native medicine men in their sweat lodges and had worked a lot on breaking down reality. So up to that point, I was, through the experiences I've had, I was very clear that reality itself was not tangible, not solid. It was very transparent and shiftable. But I was still very real. I was still very solid. So the first thing that came from the experience was the recognition that I'm just as unreal as reality, right? I'm no more real, no more important than anything else. In fact, I'm completely equal with it, because we're all just a ghost manifestation of something. So that was the first part that came out of it. The second part was this bizarre experience that, how to describe it again? Instead of thought, because thought wasn't there, which was very, very interesting. That here I was in the most dangerous moment of my life, and thought couldn't appear. But what did appear, I was calling them complete clusters of information. So the cluster of information would like come up, explode in front of my face. It would be instantaneously known, whatever it was, understood, and then it would just disappear. And then the next cluster would. So I was getting these like cluster bubbles of whatever information seemed to be important at the time. Also, what was going on there is, I'm calling it a computer download. It's like someone stuck a memory stick in the back of my head, and I could feel this stuff just being put in there. And part of my life since then, because we can talk about it if you want. I mean, I went through a terrible 10-year period after this. I mean, I can, if you think this is interesting for your viewers, it was a horrible 10 years actually. But part of this time, because it was 15 years ago, has been trying to go through the computer of my mind and figure out what files were placed into my experience. So when I finally did climb out of it, because a friend had fallen in at the same time. That's what made it so bizarre. It's not just me who fell in. I accidentally pulled a friend in with me, who didn't swim. Bizarrely, he was able to somehow hold. He was in a little slower place, but he was able to somehow like dog paddle against the current. And I look back, and this is all happening in microseconds, right? All this I'm describing happens in like a total of 1 second of real time. And I looked back and I said, well, if I don't get out, how is my friend going to get out? And at that point, I hit a rock. My leg hit a boulder that was high enough at the bottom of the river to deflect me a little off course, got me close enough that I could touch like the bottom of the ground and crawl out of the river. And just as I was screaming, it's shallow, you can get out. And I was going to go run to find a long tree branch. He was crawling out at the same time. And so one thing that was also really important for me from the experience, and then I'll shut up and let you ask your questions, was that I had it with someone else, and he had almost the same experience I did. And we had the ability for a couple of hours to just sit there and share our experiences together. So right away we had validation, and we had such unbelievable similarity that we were able to take that with us, which, like I said, originally was about 3 to 6 months of extreme clarity and extreme manifestation power. And then it kind of just went off a cliff. So I'll let you guys then take that wherever you'd like to take that.
Well, you mentioned the 10 years after that being not so good, being negative. What did that entail? And did it have something directly to do with that experience?
Which was what again? Sorry,
you said after your near-death experience, the 10 years after that were really not so good. Did that have to do with your near-death experience?
Not yes and no. It had to do with the fact that once you find out that you yourself are not a real entity, that you yourself are not an actual thing, that you're a thought in the mind of God, you might say, you need to take some time to integrate that. Because it's such a changeover to everything you've ever thought or believed, that you need to have some stillness, and you need to integration is the best word I would use. I've heard if you give it 2 good years, and it's one of the reasons I still like to talk about it is because if this happens to someone else, and I can't recommend any stronger than just please sit down for a while, don't do anything, allow yourself the space to understand, allow yourself the space to talk to people about it that you think might be able to give you help. Within 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I was back in the world, and I had gone overseas and was, been pushed into doing lectures and a whole bunch of things. And because I never had the time to fully deal with what that meant, my body kind of just rebelled. And about it, two things will happen. First for me anyway, was an extreme clarity. So on one hand, I had unbelievable clarity. A lot of the deepest writing in what became Falling for Truth, that book came during that period as almost automatic writing. The problem is the way I describe it now is it's like if totality is the screen that you're looking at now, I got the light shining on like a part of the screen. So the part of the screen became perfect and clear and true seeing. And there's certain parts of reality now I have no doubt about. The problem is because everything is holographic, in a sense, I did get to see everything, but not really. The light did not actually shine for me everywhere else, but and you get tricked into thinking you've seen it all. You get tricked into believing I have seen everything, I have known everything. And what happens is you can get yourself caught easily in a spiral of you don't need to do any more work. You've now figured it all out. And you can start operating in, albeit very altruistic and very the intention is good in everything you do, but because your egoic mind is still running, and because the parasitic entity is not completely, the what you want to do comes out in really messy ways. So not only are you creating more mess, then you're feeling like I want to create the same kind of balance and calmness I feel, but you actually just create mess wherever you go. And then at the same time, because you're not integrating, you didn't integrate it internally, I'm sort of at a constant battle with myself of what does this mean? Is it real? Is it fake? Did I really have this experience? And I got really sick with an illness in around 2007. An illness that actually is still going on. It's still actually not completely finished. And it will come and go over periods of time, stronger and less. I've got to say, I've seen and talked to 50 different healers all over the world on every level that you can think of. Every single one gave me a different diagnosis.
Wow.
Every single one gave me a different way to go about it. And some of them improved for a while. Sometimes but it hasn't fully gone. And so for me, the illnesses I feel are still linked to the fact that experience, or not the experience, what was revealed has not fully been accepted and integrated. And so there's still like an internal battle going on at times between what was shown and what I wished I was shown.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and maybe you did die.
Yeah, and I go through that. I mean, I know I did. I mean, I actually died, but I often wonder if all of this since then has just been like a mirage, that I just what's that story, something Owl Creek Bridge, where the person gets hung and he pretends that the rope is broke and he's had this huge wonderful experience of his life, but then when the book ends, the ropes got him and he was just like he was daydreaming in the last second of dying.
Wow.
I've gone through that. I had this talk with Bart Marshall, TAT Foundation member who went through something similar in Vietnam, and he has that many times, that has his last 40 years of his life or whatever, 50 years being a semi dreamlike manifestation, but he's actually dead. But I do know that let's say the person I used to be, that person is dead. And every time I try to be that person, life gets very, very difficult. And part of the integration process is getting comfortable that you are now a new personality coming out of this, and you have to get comfortable with the new thing and be okay with the new thing. And the new thing is going to like a lot of things you didn't like before. And this becomes very confusing. And like I say, I rejected. I tried to put myself back in the old box, and that was my error. At least the error can be shared with others now, and hopefully they could. I've been very lucky to have had a few people reach out to me with similar experiences, and I've been able to share mine with them. And I think it has helped them. It saved them. At least they tell me later that because of our talk, I would have gone left, but I went right, and things have gotten a lot smoother for a lot of people. So even though it's been hard for me, I still take it that I think it's had help for others because I haven't kept quiet and I've shared it, and but it hasn't been easy.
I had a very similar experience when I was 6 months old, and we were
Mm.
living in Oregon, and I fell into the Clackamas River with my mother. I was strapped on her back in a papoose, actually on her front, and she was sitting at the edge of a cliff. And Oregon, the ground is very wet, and she went to push herself up to stand up, and the ground slipped underneath her, and we fell 250 feet into the Clackamas River. She broke her leg. And I have very, very vivid memories of this experience of being covered and immersed in water. My mother can't swim. And I think the thing that was so interesting about that trauma was that
Right.
her survival instinct kicked in to save me. And so she found her way onto a rock and was able to pull herself up and then scream to get people to come to our aid. But what was interesting for in my experience is that I was so young. I was 6 months old, so I hadn't fully integrated into this reality, into this body. So I think that fluidity and actually being in the water was similar to a traumatic birth event, maybe made it easier for me to usher into that this reality.
Wow. And now, and of course, I know you've had all these experiences directly with Carlos Castaneda and whatever. I seem to recall somewhere when he talked about gazing and the work of gazing, that the last thing you should ever gaze is water, because of
Absolutely.
like you say, the fluidity and the movement and what can happen to you when you, in a sense, merge with the water. So here you were at a absolutely young age where you're not even speaking, you're not, and all of a sudden, in a sense, you've merged with water during a death experience. You've almost like become the water. That's a there must have been if you look back on it now, that must explain so many things of your life since then.
Absolutely. And one thing uh, that my parents mentioned is that I was completely silent through the entire experience. I didn't cry once. I didn't make a sound. So again, I think because I wasn't fully integrated into my body, I think it was extremely easy for me to become immersed, actually physically, but also energetically immersed with the water.
Mm.
And I think that's
Wow.
interesting in juxtaposition too, because you've said several times to me that you were told that you basically cried the entire first year of your life. So it was interesting that that situation was the one that you were calm in.
Exactly. And didn't cry.
And why were
Wow.
you told that you cried that your
Well, I've had several experiences with people who you might consider them seers or psychically linked, who have said that where I was previous to this embodiment was a place, basically a place of like light workers or light beings, and I was extremely happy there, and I did not want to come and be a human. I didn't want to be in this form at all. And I
Mm.
resisted when they said you have to come and do this work that you're going to do on the earth. I didn't want to. And one person said to me, it was like you were at a party you didn't want to leave. But you were basically forced to be this embodiment. And I think that's such an interesting thing, because I've been put in this energy, and I've had extremely traumatic events happen throughout my life. And I think there's been a lot of healing. Again, when we go back to talk about cellular memories, I think my body has been used to heal other people's trauma. And I think that that's one of the reasons. So I had an extremely traumatic birth. My mother was in labor for 36 hours. Again, it was like I was clinging to this other consciousness or this other reality that I was in. And I did not want to be embodied. I didn't come willfully.
So, Howdie, before you had this near-death experience, did you even then suspect that we were living in some sort of a manufactured reality or some simulation, or did that come from the vibe that you got from that experience?
I mean, the work really kind of started for me after my ex-girlfriend was murdered in 1994, and that first sent me on a real inner search, without knowing that's what I was doing, of trying to explain how can things like this happen in reality to people like her, who were in a sense living their life perfectly. If there was like a blueprint, this is how you should live your life, she was doing all of it, and now she's dead. And so I first had this semi-rejection of the standard way you're supposed to live, right from that experience itself. And then in 1997, I got so depressed that I wanted to kill myself, but I just couldn't find a really good way to do it that wouldn't create mess for the person cleaning it up. And in the midst of all that, on my birthday came a television program on from This Old Pyramid on Nova, and I knew right away that the study of ancient Egypt was, in a sense, my life. That's actually what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Why, I didn't know, but that was it. And it was like the energy changed instantaneously, and I went from this complete depression and wanting to, kill myself, to being able to go to the library the next day and reading like 6 books in the course of a day, and just churning information and knowledge, and beginning the process of moving to find people who could help me actually understand what they understood. But in the course of doing a lot of these exercises, like I say, that from the people that I met and who were showing me, like I say, reality was definitely not real. I picked that up very clearly. I also picked up very clearly right after September 11th, because I was with the Zen monk in Hawaii when it happened, and I knew instantaneously that, oh, it's a manufactured story. It's not, like, what I'm seeing is not what they're trying to tell me it is. This is like, and it's like a whole lot of things just crumbled instantaneously on seeing it on television. I think being with him was a big catalyst for that. That had I been maybe home by myself, that wouldn't have happened. But being in the environment with him and the work we've been doing and the exercises, it put me in the right mental state to be able to accept it. So I knew that reality was at least manufactured, let's put it that way. I knew that it was not tangible. I'd gotten to certain points where walls were disappearing. I would go sit down on a chair, and I didn't know if the chair would still be there when I would sit down. People would sit across from me, and they would change from one person to another person. So, I mean, I knew reality was not tangible, but I still felt there was and I was still trying to hold, and it was part of me. I was trying to hold on to this idea. There's an order. There's a goodness to it. There's something out there who cares about us, right? That was still in my system. I'm going to say 4 or 5 years after my death experience, that began to wane. And I just began to see, wait a minute, this reality is insane. It's insane. Everything about everything here on all levels is insane. And I realized, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It could have been manufactured to be insane. So this was the next big step that I hit. Was so much of what you might call the standard spiritual community, the thing that makes a spiritual community a lot of money, is controlling your thought, manifesting, making reality the way you want it to be. If you just put enough effort and you can, and then it's like, but of course, everybody wants something better, something good for themselves, and I mean, I'd like to have something that's nice and enjoyable if I have a choice between something, a brick smashing against the side of my head, or when I'm really ill, but boy, I'd like to not be ill today. But then I started to understand, but if reality is set up potentially to be insane, that this is actually like we went into some of those other ideas I had where, well, maybe this is a prison, maybe we're hostages here, maybe we're tricked into being in this place, that it has nothing to do with goodness and learning at all. It's something completely else. Then attempting to try to fix reality, attempting to try to change it or alter it or push it to where you want to go might be a gigantic waste of energy. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't affect it in certain ways, and you can't have, I would never want to say that, because I've had those experiences too, where you truly can affect reality. But how much is valuable use of our time and energy, and how much would just be bashing your head against the wall, when our limited energy might need to be used on something much, much more different? And so as I began to make these changes and started to see that it might be, it might be, to the rats in the maze, they might think the maze is insane. Why would my reality be set up like this, where I have to keep doing this and running into a wall, and I get caught in this cheese thing and whatever? And it's like, why wouldn't, but to the scientist making the experiment, it's pure brilliance. It's like, look what I'm learning how the rat handles this and does. And it's like, once you start to realize, well, we might just be rats in a maze, and there's no cosmic importance really to our lives like we like to make them be. It's as opposed, okay, now I've got to temper that, because I also think if it's a simulation, this is based on something that is actually real. It's not like just a manufactured idea. It's modeled on something. So I'm starting to move to the point that what this is modeled on is actually could have been balanced and harmonious and clear in a real world. But our world has been simulated from the time it started, whenever a real start date was. When you think of Westworld, just because I have memories going back to when I was 2 years old doesn't mean I've really been alive since I was 2 years old. I might have actually bumped into this place at the age of 16, and everything else is just backstory to make me think like I was really born and really lived, or. So once you start throwing all this stuff out, you don't really know how long the simulation might have been active. It might be a very short period of time. I'm guessing maybe no more than 200 years, maybe 2000 at the most. And everything before that is just like literally backstory. But I think it's modeled potentially on the thing our simulation is based on. And that's why we feel truth. If we go to Teotihuacan and we go to Egypt, we can't really touch our fingers on what's there. We know there's something tangible, but in this reality, we can't touch it. But if we can somehow recognize what I'm really touching is from the other reality, the place that it's modeled on, all of a sudden, we might tap into more things than we could ever imagine. So for me, it's why I still love digging into and studying this time frame that might be pre-simulation, because I know it's not just manufactured, it's from this real place. When I was having a conversation, I can't remember who I was with, he said that somebody had written a paper, and he said, if you wanted to know you live in a simulation or not, this is the question to ask yourself. If a computer programmer is building a simulation, they will put all of their effort into the present and in the future, where the simulation is going. They will put less time into the past. So if you look into the past of your world and that you have too many holes, too many things that can't be explained, there's too many question marks, then it's highly likely you're in a simulation. And man, that's our world.
Well, here's my take. I think when the world seems insane to me, what I see as the insanity is that it seems like humans have sort of lost their fluidity. Nature is fluid. Nature constantly changes. We're constantly trying to solidify things. We're trying to give things that inherent meaning that don't have inherent meaning. So what we're seeing as a reality is layer upon layer upon layer of solidified ideas. So somebody has a good idea like, oh, there's lots of people that are living on the streets and they seem unhappy and I want to feed them. Well, then they set up a soup kitchen, and so these people can come and, eat there. But after a while, that institution might be something that's rife with corruption, and it ends up defeating the purpose that it was established. And then that's where governments are coming from. That's where educational systems are coming from. That's where our medicinal system is coming from. And they all, I think, maybe started off with good intent, but they have long divorced themselves from that intent. And I think that the more that we remove ourselves from the natural cycles of life, the more apt we are to fall into these pitfalls and just kind of lose our way. I think we're trying to disassociate ourselves from the natural world, and that is insane. That's insanity right there, thinking that we can tame nature and sort of like a bonsai tree, force it to go in the path that we want it to. And that's where the insanity comes from. I think, to me, reality isn't innately insane. Our template that we're trying to force upon it is insane. Does that make any sense?
Well, yes and no. I would say nature's insane too. How many worms just died this second to feed a bunch of birds? How many small fish just died to feed a bunch of fish? Why, if you are building a sane system, would you create that particular system of constant suffering, destruction, eating of each other in one? I mean, if you really step back, it's a slaughterhouse out there. Just walk into your forest. Nature is a slaughterhouse. I mean, we can see the beauty side of it, like everything. Maya has two faces, right? Maya has a beautiful face and Maya has an ugly face. It doesn't matter which one you're looking at, still Maya. And when it comes to generally the human world, everyone wants to look at the ugly face. And there's just as many beautiful faces as well within the human part of it. But and just like nature, people want to look at the beautiful face and forget that it's an ugly slaughterhouse. And so it's this really need to be on between all of this idea of betweenness, of really having both sides and your foot on both sides all the time when you're dealing with just about everything of reality. That can you keep yourself in the middle of both and not overbalance yourself one way or the other? Because nature is a place where, in one sense, yes, I get the most balance, and I can rebalance and reheal myself so many times just by sitting peacefully at a really powerful place in nature. But I also know it's not as pretty as I like to pretend that it is. And it's an honesty that not many people want to share. It's people try to hide that fact of it. And again, if you step back deeper and deeper and deeper, well, why would you set a system up like that? Why would you set a system up that requires such carnage? Or when you pull a carrot out of the ground and eat it, does it scream? You know, we're forgetting this other side of it, that there's a brutalness inherent in this entire reality that we live in, and to try to somehow separate brutality from this experience and try to make it a really happy, wonderful, utopian place is probably guaranteed destined for failure, because that's just not how this is. One who is going to be really honest and look at both sides of this reality and acknowledge both together, the beauty and the ugly, I think that those people have a great possibility of doing amazing things here, because now they're dealing with the totality rather than just a part they like or don't like.
Sure.
Well, I've often wondered, what is the necessity of suffering? When you consider how many beings, from children to animals to, every version of humans, why do we have to create suffering on this earth? What is the lesson in suffering? And one thing that I've opined is that one of the most powerful energies that exists in this reality is fear. And if you consider that, maybe that's one of the energies that's feeding this negative entity or this negative force, is creating fear. And so that's the thing that wants us to keep resonating at this fear state, because that pulse it's almost like it's food.
I would be 100% in agreement with that this reality actually runs on fear, not love. Love is just love is like a soothing mechanism to survive it a little bit, you might say. And so the question becomes, so people say, well, then you need to remove your fear, right? You need to stop being fearful. Well, if everyone stopped being fearful, the dream might go away. Now, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's exactly what's supposed to happen. If the whole reality stopped their fear, it would end. Maybe that's when the experiment stops. Oh yeah, okay, it's done. But most people would not say, I want to get rid of my fear so that I can stop existing, right? I want to get rid of my fear so I can live better. So I can get something, I can be in a better place than I was before. So it's also, I hate to say this, but almost all, I would say 98% of anything that would be classified as religious / spiritual / self-help / whatever exercises or presentation is all built on self-importance. It's all built on trying to make you better, trying to fix you, trying to take you to one step above where you are, trying to gain more than what you had before. And that's one of the reasons I've so appreciated when I ran into Richard Rose. I ran into Richard Rose a couple of years after I'd had my experience, and he was very clear that real spiritual work is nothing to do with making yourself better. If anything, it's deconstructing yourself until you find out the only thing you can't deconstruct. Mm-hmm. Just keep getting rid of everything that's false until you find one thing that's not false, and that's what you are. That's truth. And all the rest of it is just a game you're playing, wasting time to not do that. And it was like, that was just so clear and so honest. Like that's it. And so so I would say in one sense, you could say the world is insane. Okay, yes. On another sense, the world is a giant distraction. This entire thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's happy distractions or evil, ugly distractions, it's still designed to distract us from what am I feeling? What am I experiencing? What's going on right now inside of me? What does that mean? What is it that I'm most trying to understand? What is this is a big one. What is my deepest question? I've had some people ask me, what would my number one recommendation be? I always say, find your deepest question, because you don't need answers. You've got all the answers you will ever need. They're in a sense inside of you. You know everything. The problem is, to unlock it, you need the right question. And that's not the question that's what someone else has. It's got to be yours, your personal deepest question. When you find it, and if you don't know what it is, go look for it. Because once you've got your deepest question, the answers you seek will just start appearing. And so the world is designed to distract us from doing the very one thing that we seemingly need to do.
Well, that seems as good a place as any to end the first free hour. If you would like to hear the second hour, just go to patreon.com/themeltpodcast, where for as little as $3 a month, you can gain access to full episodes, exclusive episodes, and monthly Melt meetups where we get together and just talk about particular topics that we come up with that interest us, and they end up being not only very much fun and very informative, but very therapeutic. It's good to get together with other open-minded people and just to be able to speak freely. You'd be surprised at what a medicinal quality that has. So I highly suggest it. In the second hour, we talk about emotional manipulation, the subjective definitions of insanity, reality as prison, reality as experiment, the simulation inside of the simulation, and many, many more interesting things. Howdie is great to converse with, and I always look forward to it. I hope that you were able to glean something positive from this episode, and we have many more fantastic ones coming up, so please stay tuned. All right, people, take care, please. If you've liked what you've heard and would like to contribute to The Melt, there are a few ways that you can do that. The most tangible would be financially. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and there you will find ways that you can contribute for as little as $3 a month. This will give you access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. Contributing financially will also help make The Melt better, pay the bills, and help to make this podcast a full-time endeavor that I can fully devote my time to and provide you with more content. Another way of contributing would be to go to wherever it is that you subscribe to The Melt and give it a favorable review or rating, and this will help it to reach more people. You can also spread the word to friends and family via social media, email, or word of mouth. And lastly, if none of those options are readily available or appealing to you, simply send your positive thoughts and intentions. In an interconnected and quantumly entangled multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.